And welcome back to the big show, everybody, as we continue to introduce you to really people in the golf business who are great communicators, great celebrities. And Kraig Kann falls into that category. Longtime Golf Channel guy, SiriusXM, now runs his own company, the Kann Advisory Group. And when you see him and hear him, oh, yeah, Kraig Kann. Kraig, welcome to the show and roll tide, my friend. How are you?
Roll Tide. I'm a Mizzou guy, by the way, and I think we're coming to Tuscaloosa this year. That ought to be a good game. I think I might have to make that trip. It's great to be with you. Been a big fan of yours for a long time. Honored to be on your show.
You know, when you come to Tuscaloosa, let me know. I might be able to get you in one of those premier skyboxes. There's a few of those at Bryant-Denny Stadium.
There are a couple of those. A few more probably than we have at Faurot Field, but nonetheless, I've been there before. It didn't go so well for us. Hopefully there's a little bit of a different story this fall. We got a long way between now and then, but I might hit you up on that. It'd be fun to hang out.
Yeah, Kraig, I've been an admirer of yours for a long time, and I don't exaggerate when I say you're one of the best communicators in the business because you do. You ask great questions, and that's an art form because not everybody wants to give great answers, and most people are very guarded. But you bring out the best in people. What is it, Kraig? Why are you such a great interviewer? Because, and that's a hard question, but you have these qualities that make for a great listen.
Well, first off, I really appreciate that. I think, a lot of people talk today. Very few actually have something worth paying attention to or something to say. And our job, I think, as interviewers is to be thoughtful and to be a good listener, but also to consider the audience first. And I kind of do it that way all the time, whether I'm doing a keynote speech or talking to a group in one of my workshops. I start with the end in mind first. And I think about the audience and what they'll say when they leave, what they'll tell other people when it's over, and how they'll feel more importantly. And I think you try to create some sort of an emotional connection with your guests. I always, whether I was on the set at Golf Channel or any of the other roles that I had when I was Chief Communications Officer for the LPGA, working with those great players and helping share their stories, I try to think about their brand and what the story is that needs to be told. And I think that's really important. And sometimes I hear a lot of people, basically answer their own question. And I think it's a lot better when you set them up to be able to share their story. I think that's one of the keys.
Kraig, the first time when you went to work for the Golf Channel back in '95, and there were some great characters. I mean, Scott Van Pelt and Brian Hammonds and Peter Kessler and Kelly Tillman and yourself. I mean, I love all you guys. But when you first met Mr. Palmer, and obviously I think you had probably interviewed him a time or two, were you nervous?
Oh, of course I was nervous. I remember my interview going down from Kalamazoo, Grand Rapids, Michigan. I had done local sports for 8 years, and they flew me down first class, Doug, which was just eye-opening to me. And then they flew me back coach, and that was a little bit disheartening. I never understood exactly why that happened, but I found out later it was because they wanted to let us know that Golf Channel was going to be a first-class operation, and that's how they were going to treat their people, and they did that, by the way. But they also wanted us to know it was going to be difficult. It was going to be challenging. There were going to be a few bumps in the road. And for us to make it as one of the first niche networks, in fact, we were the first niche sports network to really go mainstream before MLB Network, NFL Network, NHL, and all the rest that you see, Tennis Channel, et cetera. There were going to be some tough times, and we weren't going to stay in five-star hotels, and we weren't going to fly first class all the time at all. So it was an interesting message. But I met Mr. Palmer, and I got to spend some time around him. He had a parking space at the Golf Channel. You did not dare park in that parking space, by the way, because you never knew when he was going to show up. But you know what he did? He made the rounds. He walked around. He made you feel special. I've got some amazing stories to tell. I'll tell you one of them. 1996, right after the Olympics in Atlanta, he opened an Arnold Palmer design course in Conyers, Georgia. And it was on the site of the equestrian events for the Olympics. And they said, Kraig, you and Al Pollack, camera guy, are going to head up there and fly with Mr. Palmer. And he's going to open his course, the grand opening. You're going to chart the day and do a feature story, all that. Wow, right? What an opportunity. So met Mr. Palmer at his hangar in Orlando at the airport that morning, flew up there with the king. He played golf. I did all the interviews and walked around and kind of, chronicled the day for a feature on Golf Central. At the end of the day, went back. He was standing at the top of the stairs of his airplane, and we had still been interviewing all these other dignitaries. And he said, "Come on, let's go. And so, full throttle back. We're back to Orlando. We get back to his hangar. And I'm telling you, Doug, the tile, the marble floor in that hangar was absolutely pristine. And it had the logo, that iconic logo with the umbrella.
Right.
And I said, got off the plane, said, "Mr. Palmer, thank you for an amazing day." He said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Well, I'm going home, sir." And he said, "No, you're not. Hold on a second." And he goes back into his plane and he wheels out a Coleman cooler, Doug. A Coleman cooler, and in it, he's got a bunch of beers. He puts up 4 directors' chairs, his co-pilot, myself, my camera guy, Al, and the king. And I called home. I said, "I'm going to be a little bit late." And why's that? I said, "Well, Arnold Palmer says we're having a beer. And if the king says we're having a beer, we're having a beer." And so we sat around and he told stories and sat there. I'll never forget it. And, they always say Mr. Palmer made everybody feel like the most important person in the room. That's exactly what he did that day. That's exactly what I witnessed every time I was around him. You had a great pride in working for him. You wanted to make it succeed because of him and because of Joe Gibbs, who you know well. It's very important. So for all of us that were there on those earliest days, Jennifer Mills, mentioned her name,
yes.
and Mike Ritz and Tom Nettles, and you mentioned Kessler,
wow.
and all the rest. Linda Cardwell, who passed away, recently, and that's such a sad story. Brian Hammond's one of my really dear friends from the business. We worked our tails off. I actually worked with Van Pelt while he had hair. Okay, and Van Pelt was so good at his job, and Kelly Tillman, you mentioned her. I mean, we all had this desire to make it succeed, Doug, and that's what I think I'm most proud of. There's no way I'm sitting here talking to you. There's no way I do what I do now if not for that opportunity. And much of that is because of Arnold Palmer.
Wow, what a story. I mean, to think that the king, you're not going anywhere. We're going to sit down and have a couple of brewskis. I mean, that is an amazing story. All right, now take us to Tiger Woods, because really you guys begin in 95.
Yeah.
And social media had not exploded, obviously. And so really the only time at least I ever saw Tiger Woods highlights, unless he came to Birmingham, and he did a couple of times. Stanford played in a tournament at Shoal Creek. I mean, it was you guys chronicled virtually every big tournament he played in as a young man. I mean, obviously you got some pretty special Tiger stories.
Well, I will say this. The Golf Channel is where it is today, much because of many of the players, and many of them were on the PGA Tour champions, and a lot of them were on the PGA Tour. You remember the old Merrill Lynch shootouts, and
yes.
If not for Fred Couples and Davis Love and Payne Stewart, who would say, "Come on, young man, come inside the ropes," and he'd let you walk with him, and Peter Jacobson, and I could go on down the line of all the players that made the Golf Channel what it was by giving us their time, on the PGA Tour champions, guys like Trevino and Raymond Floyd, and on down the line of all the greats. They made time for the Golf Channel, and they made time for the game because they understood it was an opportunity to build brands. But there was no brand bigger than Tiger, and Tiger came along at the exact right time for the Golf Channel. For the game of golf as well, I would say. And I had a front row seat. My first job was PGA Tour beat reporter and an anchor of Golf Central. And so I just happened to be chosen to be able to, number one, cover the first Masters the Golf Channel covered in 95 when Crenshaw won. But we know Tiger Woods was on the rise. I was at the Hello World press conference in Milwaukee as the beat reporter. And I can tell you exactly who he played with, Jeff Hart and John Elliott. Nobody remembers that, but there's a trivia question for you. Wow. And I followed him around. I was there in 97 when he won the Masters, got to interview him one-on-one in the locker room afterwards. That was a special moment for me. As sad as it is, and all those majors that I covered with him, I was the one anchor whose number got called the day after Thanksgiving when he hit the fire hydrant. Wow. And I'll never forget that day. What started out as a simple little breaking news story that turned into such an amazing part of his ultimate legacy, really, in his career. It changed course for him in so many different ways. I was there in 2008 at Torrey Pines when he won on a broken leg. I've been there for a lot of the stuff. He's a special talent beyond words. And he carried golf, and he carried the Golf Channel in so many different ways. And, I've said this, and, I could go on and on with you, but I really feel like he deserves to have that all-time win total on the PGA Tour. I don't know that he's going to get it, but I'd love to be able to make out his schedule and pick the tournaments he'd play. Because something, he always seems to pick the hardest ones, and he ought to pick a few of the other ones where he has a better chance and doesn't have to walk so far and can use his iron game. But no, it was special being able to cover him. I'm very grateful for that opportunity.
Craig, obviously now you're running your company, the Kann Advisory Group, and anybody who follows you on social media, you run those clips all the time where you're talking to corporate groups, and you do a fantastic job. Do you miss not being inside the ropes anymore? Because you were so good at it.
Well, I appreciate that. I do miss it, to be honest. I've thought about it many times. Life takes you in a lot of different directions.
Yes.
I had an amazing run for about 18 years at the Golf Channel. I never saw Mike Wan coming at me to potentially be the chief communications officer of a professional sports league. Those opportunities don't usually fall in the laps of guys who wear makeup and read teleprompters for a living. And I felt like the chance to be in the C-suite of a professional sports league at that level and help try to raise awareness for women's sports and the game of golf in that opportunity was something that I may never get again. And I felt like I needed to take that. I spent 5 years there, had an amazing run, was able to be a part of the Olympic Committee for Communications in Rio in 2016. That was special. The LPGA was on a dramatic rise. Mike Wan's leadership, amazing. Our leadership team was fantastic and very dynamic. And then after that 5-year run, I said, I want to give back. I want to do something to be able to help other people and corporations to be able to share their story, to be able to own a room, to be able to own the stage, to be able to understand what their message is and communicate it in such a way that you can make a difference and not just a paycheck. And so I've been doing that since 2017 and traveling as a keynote speaker, sharing my message about the value of communication to corporations and leadership and how people need to be able to be comfortable with their story. So I do miss TV. I love doing radio for SiriusXM. You were on my show many times, connected with Kraig Kann on SiriusXM. That was a special run for me. I'd love to do it again. To be perfectly honest, I'd love to do it again. I don't know that I could do any of it full time, but I enjoyed hosting shows like the Grey Goose 19th Hole, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
Panel shows where you have people sitting around you that you can make them the stars of the show. That's what I enjoyed. I loved asking the questions. I loved having the banter and the conversation just like we're doing here. So yes, I missed that. It's a rush. That's all I ever wanted to do when I was a kid, probably like you, is to be a sportscaster. Life takes you in different directions. I love what I'm doing now and, would love to come to Birmingham and set up shop and do a few workshops for companies in your area. But yeah, I'd love to do it again if I had an opportunity.
Hey, a couple more questions because I don't want to keep you too
Sure.
long. But, I remember your SiriusXM show and you and John Cook were actually inside the locker room, the White Sox locker room.
Yeah.
And I know you love the White Sox. I'm a Cardinals guy. But Tony La Russa was the manager at the time. Yeah. I find it fascinating because he's a baseball guy, and he can be prickly at times, but you get him talking golf. You get all these guys outside the golf realm, and they all kind of love the game. I don't know. I find it fascinating that you can bring these people from outside the game and bring them inside, Craig. I don't know. Yeah. And that's kind of what you did really, really well.
Well, thank you. I would say this. I go back to the Golf Channel for just a second. People said, hey, you work for the Golf Channel. And I said, you know what? It's a little bigger than that. It's golf's channel. Yes. And I think that that's an important thing because all these professional athletes, and you see it with Steph Curry, and you go sport to sport to sport to sport, they all love the game, right? They're all tied to the game in some way. They love it. They're obsessed by it. And so I'm a big White Sox guy. John Cook's a big Dodgers guy. And so we looked at the schedule, and all of a sudden we found out that the Dodgers were playing in Chicago at guaranteed rate. And I called a couple of the people I know at the White Sox and said, hey, could we? And they said, could you? Absolutely. You can come on in. We'll set you up right near the locker room, and we'll get you this guest, this guest, this guest, and this guest. And all of a sudden they roll in Tony La Russa, Steve Stone, one of the broadcasters who's been an idol of mine for a long time. And we just had a fabulous show. And La Russa was amazing. I mean, here he is coming in, and the White Sox are trying to have a halfway decent season. There were a lot of expectations on them at the time. They didn't have a good year last year, by the way. Right. And I don't think they're going to be very good this year. But anyway, he comes in, and and he just all of a sudden lights up. That's what happens. You talk about their sport, and it's, the X's and the O's and all that stuff. You talk about golf. Oh, hey, they want to talk about this because everybody, their favorite professional golfer or favorite golfer is themselves. They want to talk about their game. They want to learn a little bit more, all that. You know the deal. So It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. We had a great time that day.
Yeah, it was good stuff. And even like today, Coach Saban, obviously retired, now in Jupiter, playing golf like crazy. And he'll talk football. Obviously, that's the main topic of discussion with all that's going on in college sports, et cetera. But, man, he wants to talk about that golf game. It's improving, and he's playing and getting lessons. So you're right, golf is one of those fascinating sports that kind of, and not just sports, politics, et cetera, brings us all together a little bit, right?
One of the things that I talk about a lot, I don't believe that I do keynote speeches. I don't believe that I do workshops. I don't believe that I do virtual programs. What I try to do is deliver an experience. And ultimately, there are a lot of people that teach golf. They can help you with your slice, or they can help you to hit a draw, or try to improve your club head speed or something like that. But ultimately, everybody involved in the game should try to deliver an experience. That's what you do. You're trying to paint a picture when you're out there on the golf course of what the experience is that day that you're watching. When I did my radio show for SiriusXM, I didn't want to give people just another show. I wanted it to be an experience. Give me 6 guests, give me 2 hours, and let's let people enjoy the moment, call in and be a part of it. And that's what golf does. So whether you're talking about Nick Saban, he wants to talk about his experiences with the game. Everybody wants to talk about their experiences. You go to Augusta, if somehow you land the lottery ticket, you're going there not just to see Augusta National. You're there to feel the experience. And that's the beauty of the game of golf. It's different than anything else. It's why I've loved it for so many years. And we're both blessed, you and I, to have been a part of it. You're still doing it.
Well said, well said. And one final question, just to kind of bring it up to date. I mean, obviously, Scotty Scheffler did an amazing thing at the Players. Nobody had ever won it back-to-back. And what he's doing right now is Tiger-esque as far as statistically from tee to green. And now I guess he's figured out his putting. Was this a shot in the arm, Kraig, the tour needed? Somebody like Scotty Scheffler to stand up and go, listen, I'm a dominant force. I may not be the most colorful guy in the world, but I'm letting my clubs do the talking. Did the PGA Tour need this?
Clark, Harmon, obviously Scheffler up at the top. It was a really interesting leaderboard on Sunday. I have to admit that I found myself watching and wondering a little bit about what John Rahm might have been thinking, or what Dustin Johnson might have been thinking, or a few of the others that are over there playing live. Brooks Koepka. I think the PGA Tour absolutely needed it. At the same time, I wonder, if I'm being honest, about the perception of the accomplishment today. And I think that's what's changed in the game of golf. Look, if John Rahm wins 4 events on live, does it really matter? I don't know that it does. Now, if he comes to Augusta National and wins the Masters, is that great for the game? What does that say? If Scotty Scheffler is able to win and say, I am the number one, I am the number one. Is that good for the game? Probably so. I just don't know where we are right now. I have said this, and I'm going to make no apology for it. I think the professional game is fractured. I don't know for how long it will remain that, but it takes me back to kart and Indy. It takes me back to the ABA and the NBA. It takes me back to a lot of other things, the USFL, the NFL. But this one feels worse. It has for the better part of 3 years almost now. Yeah. And I think Sunday was great for the players. It was great for Scheffler because of what he accomplished. But we need the best players playing together. We need John Rahm over there competing. We need Brooks Koepka competing. And if you can tell me that those guys over there on live can honestly say, you know what? I'm over here. This is exactly where I need to be. And I don't need the Players' Championship. And I don't need to be able to play against Scotty Scheffler and those guys. I'm just fine. I think they're lying. I think they're not telling the truth. Just imagine the Players' Championship with a shotgun start yesterday, or music or shorts or whatever it might have been. It's not the same thing. I'm not taking anything away from live. If guys want to go chase the money and go play over there, that's fine for them. But if we're trying to figure out who the best players in the world are, Scotty Scheffler's number one in the world, but you want to see him beating those other guys. And that's what I miss.
Boy, Kraig, that was fantastic. And, it was interesting because I did read under the live shotgun format, Scotty Scheffler would have finished yesterday on like the 14th hole. So we wouldn't have seen him finish on 15, 16, 17, and 18. Talk about void of drama.
That's the drama that we had at the Players. We had all those names, and you did not know. Schauffele right there in the mix with his opportunity. Harman had his opportunity. Clark, my goodness. What a fast finish for him. Could it have been better? Yeah, throw in a few other names. Some of the big names missed the cut. That happens all the time. All the time. The drama of the Players is almost unmatched. It has that opportunity every year. You just want to have the best of the best competing against each other as often as possible. And I just hope they get this thing resolved. I don't know how it's going to ultimately end, but there isn't anybody, I think, that can actually tell me that what's going on and make me believe it, that what's going on is better for the game of golf and that we're growing the game of golf. I don't think we're growing it. The only thing I think we're doing is I think we're sending more people who play the game recreationally or at a high level as an amateur to want to go out and play more and watch less. That's what I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And, we began this conversation talking about what a great communicator that you are. And you unveiled, talking to your corporate people, and you leave them with food for thought, and you leave them with wanting more. And Kraig, that's where we are. I'm going to say goodbye, but oh my goodness, you left me wanting more. So I guess we're going to have to do this again sometime.
I'd love to do it. There's a quote that I have from a guy named Kraig Kann, who was my professor in college. I've never forgotten it when I was going through the broadcast journalism school at Missouri, and we were working at the TV station KOMU. And he used to tell all of us as students, you can't preach to anybody unless you can get them into the church. And that's what your job is. That's what my job is when I'm out there speaking to corporate groups. We have to get people into the pews, so to speak. We have to get them in physically, and we have to get them in emotionally so they'll be able to listen. But you know something? None of us are anything without a message. And as I said earlier when we were talking, there's a lot of people that talk. Very few actually have something to say. You got to have a message. You got to be able to stand for something. You got to be able to put something out there. And, I love a format like this where you and I can just talk about it. Everybody's got their opinions, but it's a very interesting time. I'd love to come on your show again, and you do a wonderful job. You've been on mine. It's always been great conversations, so I'm very grateful.
Kraig, all the best to you and the family. We'll be in touch. Thank you, my friend.
All right, take good care.